Hello, welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today, we have a guest that is a dear friend of mine, and I'm really excited to have him. We've been having some wonderful conversations over the last 11 years, and especially even recently, talking about this specific topic of sexual alchemy and the work that he is doing now with men. Nakula, who is known to me as Nick Pereira, and he'll explain a little bit about that, has been on this journey, this spiritual journey, ever since I've known him. And one of the things I appreciate about him is that when he learns about a topic, he goes for mastery. And so he is, and he probably would argue that he has yet mastered this topic, but he has learned it at a much deeper level than most people. If you've ever heard of Napoleon Hill and his book, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about sexual transmutation. He actually has a whole chapter where he talks about it. Now, beyond that, there's actually not a lot of information out there to the masses of most people that are aware of it. And so, however, this is a topic that there are the top performers, elite athletes, and so forth that are aware of this. And so I'm really excited that Nick is going to be sharing, and I will call him Nick for the purposes of this podcast. But he's going to be talking about it at a deeper level. And at the end, gentlemen, this is for you. Mostly women, this is also for you kind of indirectly. You get the benefit of it as well. But afterwards, we are going to talk about a webinar and free opportunity that Nick is going to be offering to our community exclusively. So make sure you stay tuned to the end, where he's going to talk about how you can take advantage of that. So, but Nick, welcome to Leaders Transformation. We're excited that you're here today.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, and congratulations on your podcast. I know you've interviewed a tremendous amounts of people, really successful people, leaders of transformation, people who are out there every single day making a difference. And I'm honored to be here and connect with your audience and you as always.
Well, and you were actually a guest way, way, way back in the beginning as well. And even actually, it's funny, if somebody would go listen to that one and listen to this now, they would see your progression of transformation into what you're doing now. It's just been amazing, amazing over the last 5 years. So talk about your name. Let's just to get that off the table here. Nakula, Nick Pereira. Where did that? Where did that transformation happen? Yeah, what do we call you?
Yeah. So it doesn't. You can call me Nick. That's perfectly fine. My mother will call me Nicholas, and my spiritual master will call me Nakula. And so, depending how you know me, you'll call me different names. And so how I got that name was I was initiated into a spiritual order of Bhakti Yoga, better known as, or more popularly known as, the Hare Krishnas in the Western world. And Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti means service or divine love. I would equate it to the word agape in the Christian language. And yoga means union, right? So a bhakti yogi is someone who's aspiring for union with God, to know God at the most deepest and intimate levels. And so how I got the name was I studied with the order. I took discipleship. So I became a disciple or a student of Bhakti Marg Swami, who is a spiritual master within the order. And he gave me the name Nakula Das. And so I'm born Nicholas Pereira. Most people call me Nick. It's cool to call me Nick. And I do my semen retention work or sexual alchemy work, which we're going to talk about, under the name Nakula Das, because it's where I got a lot of the in-depth information. I was introduced to sexual alchemy and sex transmutation like most people who've ever even heard of it. Most people have never heard of it. Anybody who has heard of it, I would say that most people in the Western world have been introduced to it by Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, or The Laws of Success, as you mentioned. And so I was introduced to the concept, through my personal development journey, through my spiritual process and learning about success and mastery and life, this topic of sex transmutation. Now I'm a guy, and if you mention the word sex, my ears happen to be oh yeah, I'm interested for sure. Let's talk about this, right? And Napoleon Hill I mean, he dedicates a whole chapter to it. And basically, to summarize the chapter, he basically says that if a man does not, and a woman too, this is both for men and women, but I'm going to speak to it on the male side of things. But basically, if a man does not master his sexual energy, does not learn the art of sexual transmutation, he will never reach success beyond the basic needs of the human body. Basically, he will, stay with the status quo. He'll never arise to anything different. And so I thought that was really interesting. But one thing Napoleon Hill doesn't do is he doesn't teach you how to do it. He tells you how important it is. He goes into why it works, but he never says, here's how you do it. And so I was really curious about this subject, mainly because I'm a guy who's interested in sex and sexuality. And like most men in this age, we're exposed to porn, we're exposed to sexual, we're not really exposed to good sex education, right? Sex education in my high school was, here are some condoms, here's how you put them on, don't get an STD. Here's how a baby's created. Watch this video of a baby being born, and everyone's like, "Oh God, geez, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to see this." Right? And so there you go. There's sex education. So as you can see, it's not much of an education. And so I wanted to have like a real sex education and really learn not just the physical aspects, but what are the mental aspects, the emotional aspects, and I was really curious about the spiritual aspects. And that's because one of my inspirations is my spiritual master, Bhakti Swami. He's been a monk for over 40 years. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, geez, like, man, like, come on, man. Like, there's no little urge there. There's no, like, and there's no disrespect to him. We've had many conversations and, that's his disposition. And he's, I would consider him a saint. Me, not a saint, and that is not my disposition. So I was like, well, what about me, right? I'm not going to be a monk. And that was what I thought. And the only way that I learned about sexual transmutation is through the yogic system, and where they really have a heavy message of celibacy. You have to become celibate, and you have to transmute this sexual energy. And essentially, the goal is to transcend your sexual energy because you're transcending all the bodily needs, so that you can become a transcendent being or a spirit. You can realize yourself as soul. And being the personality that I am, I was like, okay, that's great, but I'm not going to give up sex. I have a wife. I like to spend time with my wife, and we're very open in our sexual relationships. And so we thought, well, this isn't gonna work. So how do we do it? And so I kept studying and looking, and that's where I found sexual alchemy, or the practices of sexual kung fu. Kung fu, the original meaning of kung fu is that which requires daily discipline. So that's what kung fu is. Kung fu means that which requires daily discipline or daily practice. So sexual kung fu is about bringing daily practice towards your sexual energy. And this mainly comes from the Taoist tradition. And if you look at the Taoist tradition, now they are what I would call alchemists or energy workers. They really work on the level of energy, and they look at sex in a very medical, matter-of-fact way. This is what it is. So they don't have a concept of sin. They don't have a concept of good or bad or right or wrong. They have more of a concept of action reaction, right? This is the energy, this is what happens. This is the energy, this is what happens. And so I really resonated with this way. And one of the things that they teach is for men of all walks of life to be able to transmute their sexual energy while having a sexual life. In fact, they go on to even suggest that it is not so healthy to totally go celibate, but to actually stimulate your sexual energy and use it consciously. But the main principle that all traditions, at some level, when you look at their deep, more mystic side of the tradition, the more spiritual side of the tradition, there is a concept of a man preserving his seed and the power of semen retention. And this becomes the main aspect, or the main point in which a man can become a sexual alchemist. So what is sexual alchemy? It's the ability to use your sexual energy in a non-physical way to create or manifest or attract the results which you would like. And so that could be used as an athlete right? Like we know that many athletes practice no sex before, before game day. David Hay, the heavyweight boxing champion, 6 weeks before a fight, no sex, no masturbation, no drop of semen is let loose. Mike Tyson went 5 years with no sex to develop his control and his ability because he wanted to be the youngest heavyweight champion in the world. Muhammad Ali credits his ability to say no to sexual activity and loss of semen to becoming a heavyweight champ. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Mahatma Gandhi says a man who learns to retain his semen or retain his seed will have unfailing power. So if we start looking at these super successful people, Steve Jobs and so many others, Sting gives his creative aspects of his art to his tantric practices and his sexual practices. Kanye West, 50 Cent. I mean, all of these guys have talked about this practice. And what it is the ability to control your sexual energy, use that energy to create material success. So if you want more money, if you want a great relationship, if you want more intimacy and connection in your relationship, this is your vehicle. If you want to become a better leader, a more effective leader, then understanding your own sexual energy and then therefore other people's sexual energy is going to make you extremely influential and powerful in your work and allow you to have a deep, positive impact in the world. And if you're going for spiritual enlightenment, there's no getting past this. You do not get spiritual enlightenment without at least bare minimum understanding this knowledge.
Wow, there's so much. I could listen to you all day, and you know that. And we've had conversations that have pretty much lasted all day. So I'm so fascinated by this, and this is why I wanted you to come up and talk about this on this show. This is something that, like I said, is not being talked about. You mentioned it's not being talked about, and yet it's so powerful. And it's so funny because even I know when I was younger, I never really attributed it to that, but when I read Napoleon Hill's material and so forth, and I was like, oh yeah, I do that, and it actually allows me to tap into creativity and channel my focus and my energy into a particular area to create something. So it's so powerful. Now let's talk about what happens in the body just a little bit in terms of, you mentioned about semen retention. What happens in that case when they're not retaining, like there's a depletion. And you and I know we've talked about this, and I'll be straight up. I've been on the other side of this and experience. And so I can see, and I say that with compassion. And this is why I wanted to bring this, is because there are a lot of men that are well-intentioned, that are good people, that, that want to do well. I even know people that are addicted to pornography that they don't want to be, but they're kind of stuck in this loop and so forth. And they don't understand why. They don't have the energy to fulfill their dreams, and they don't have the clarity of mind, or, the passion that they like. It's like they're trying to muster it, but there's like this leakage that's happening. Right. So talk about what actually happens in the body, and then how this can help to redirect that energy in a different way.
Sure. I'll say a couple things about this. First, I'm going to take it one step back for both men and women, and then I'm going to go more into the men's side of thing. One thing I find fascinating is when I started this work and started teaching men how to transmute their sexual energy, is how many women have come to me and said, do you have a woman's course? Can you teach me to do it? And so I personally don't, but the answer is yes, women can do this too. Of course, our biology is different. And that's one of the first things that we have to acknowledge, is that we are not the same. Men and women are not the same. We have differences. We have different biology. And because we have different biology, we also have different psychology. And the better that we can understand our differences and realize that we are complementary for each other, then the better we all do. And this is what makes strong families. And when we have strong families, you have strong communities. And when you have strong communities, you have strong nations. And so when we talk about sexual energy, we're going right into the fabric of our very society. And so let's think about strictly on a biology level. Okay, when you are aroused, when someone is engaging in sexual activity, the body changes. Okay, so for a man, his blood rushes to his penis, he gets enlarged. There are psychological effects that he also experiences more what I'm going to call masculinity or manliness, right? Like he tends to be a little bit more dominant if he's sexually aroused. He tends to be more passionate. He's more taking control in that situation, right? So there are effects that happen because you have to remember that your body is a conduit for energy or spirit to flow through it. So your body, if you think of your body as an antenna, when it's put in a certain state, it actually is more effective. It receives the picture and its ability to create in a better way. When a woman is sexually aroused, there is also physiological differences to her. So sometimes, her lips could get bigger, her cheeks can get red. There are also blood flows differently in the body, arousing different parts of her body. And in that way, she is also like, so again, if you can imagine an antenna has tweaked her antenna, right? So in this way, she's actually vibrating or picking up a higher frequency. So this happens for both men and women in a state of an arousal. Now, what we have to understand is that when we are in a state of arousal or we have high sexual energy, so hence Napoleon Hill says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, a man, and this is true for women too, who have a high sex drive, right, also generally has high creativity, solutions, and are driven. Why? Because they're interlinked. So what happens is that when you are also in a state where you have high sex drive, your neuroplasticity or your brain wires itself easier. So this is what some people refer to as sex magic, or you'll see these practices where people, why is it that, people get in an aroused state and then will imagine what it is that they want to manifest? It's because what they're doing is that your unconscious or subconscious mind, your actual brain will wire itself easier when you're in an aroused state. So the first thing is that we all can practically understand that there is a physiological difference to who we are when we are in an aroused state or in a non-aroused state. All right. So now that we've got that as like a base, then we could say, okay, let's speak specifically about this on a masculine side, on the men's side. This is both true for men and women. Semen is the essence of the body. 40 to 60 ounces of blood. It takes about 40 to 60 ounces of blood to create 1 drop of semen. And so you have to think about that when you first came into physical being, right? Semen and the sperm was mixed with an egg, and in the right environment, the feminine environment, life can grow. Okay. So now we take a look at this and say, okay, so what it takes is that at least half of you needs to be a strong masculine energy or a semen, which is flowing at the very essence of your physical being. Semen is all your best stuff. So what happens with a man is that from a biological perspective, it just makes sense. Nature, by its design, is going to take all your best proteins, enzymes, nutrients, zinc, all your best stuff, and it's going to put it into the semen, because the body, what is success to the body? The success to the body is I am carrying on my seed, my genes. That is what the body, so totally at an unconscious level. So at a conscious level, we may think, no, success is when I hit $1 million, or success. Your body's success is one thing. Are you carrying on your genes? Okay. So because of this, by nature's design, it puts all your best stuff into your semen. Now, when you don't use your semen, when you don't allow yourself to ejaculate, in about 7 to 10 days, again, by nature's design, your body says, well, wait a sec. Hey, man, you're not using this. Like, what's going on? Right? So what it does is it reabsorbs back the semen into the body and redistributes it throughout your body. What this does is it takes all your best stuff and it redistributes it back to your body. And this gives you all your best proteins, enzymes, nutrients, zinc. And what it does is it stimulates testosterone growth. Okay. I'm going to give you an analogy, okay, of basil plants. You know that if you talk to anybody who grows plants, they'll tell you that the key to a healthy big plant is never to let it seed, never let it come to seed, because once it comes to seed, its energy is put into that seed. So what they'll do, and I learned this from my mom. My mom says, oh, I was explaining to my parents, yes, semen retention, funny conversation, right? And so so my mom's like, oh, it's just like the basil plant, right? I said, yes, it is. So before the basil plant comes to fruit, before flowers can be blossomed, the person that wants to grow the plant will cut the seeds off so that energy stays within the plant and it continues to grow. So this is what happens. Our semen is reabsorbed back into our body. All of our best stuff is distributed through the body, which begins to give you more masculine qualities. It begins to stimulate testosterone. In fact, I have one student who measured their testosterone before taking my course, and then 6 weeks later measured their testosterone again with 150% increase in testosterone. All right. And why? Because what ends up happening is nature. Remember, what is nature wanting you to do? It wants you to reproduce. So therefore, nature says, hey, man, you're not reproducing, right? You're not letting your stuff go. So we're going to help you out. We are literally going to make you more attractive. We're going to give you brighter skin. We're going to repair those damaged cells. We're going to make your voice deeper. And because we're going to make you more masculine on a physical level, by nature, you will become more masculine on a psychological level. You're going to want to get things done. When you see injustice, you're going to want to protect. You are literally going to bring all the qualities of a strong man to the table, which is going to give you leadership qualities, which is going to give you higher vibrational frequencies to attract. It's going to give you creative solutions to problems as you run into it. It's going to put more abundant opportunities in your path because you are literally going to become part of that 20% of men who are leaders. And it's happening on a biological level. So we aren't even touching the esoteric or spiritual part of this. If you simply just understand how your biology works, you will never want to waste your seed. When men ejaculate, here's what you should know. When you ejaculate, you release something called prolactin into your system. Prolactin reduces testosterone growth. Why? Because when you ejaculate, your body does not know whether you ejaculated because you are with your partner, or because you were watching porn, or because you've developed the masturbation habit. Okay? It doesn't know the difference. All it knows is you've ejaculated, and it goes, great. Congratulations. You are successful. And it releases prolactin in the system. Prolactin stifles testosterone growth. Since the 1920s, studies show that each generation after the 1920s has less and less testosterone, meaning men my age and younger, since the 1920s, we are actually less men on a biological level than our forefathers were, right? And there's many reasons to that. Sedentary lifestyle. We're all sitting around on the computer, binge watching Netflix. Porn is a huge detriment towards your sexual energy and your ability to get real sex and real masculine energy. Because what porn does and masturbation does is it completely depletes you of your energy. So when you ejaculate, prolactin is released, it stifles your testosterone growth. Now, imagine if you're ejaculating every single day. You are actually living in a state of energetic depletion. Now, remember, I said 40 to 60 ounces of blood is needed to create 1 drop of semen. So if you are constantly ejaculating, your body is using a ton of energy to reproduce its semen and get you up to sufficient semen standards, right? And in that way, you are living in an energetic state of depletion. It also creates a a conscious link between you and your body where you're so dependent on sensual pleasure that you can't live without it. Here comes the addiction part. When you watch porn specifically, dopamine is released into your system. Dopamine is nature's reward system. So dopamine is not a bad thing, but porn releases up to 200% unnatural amounts of dopamine into your system. This damages your dopamine receptors and it throws your hormones off balance. When your dopamine receptors are damaged, you have to have more and more dopamine to feel good. So dopamines are feel good. It's a reward. Like, so back in the day, I'm a man, I go out and, I hunt and I bring home, dinner. I get dopamine for doing my manly duties of providing and protecting, right? Sex being the highest element of sex to the body, of success, to the body, it releases the most dopamine. Porn and masturbation tricks your unconscious mind. It tricks your body to saying you got sex when you didn't, right? You ejaculate, you release all your energy, and now you start becoming dependent, like an addict, on this activity to make you feel good. So much to the point that so many men and any honest man will say this, after they ejaculate, that they feel somewhat depressed. That unless they do it in a healthy way. So this doesn't mean you can never ejaculate. It means healthy ejaculation. You do it during sexual activity, and as a sexual alchemist, unless you're planning on having a baby, you don't ejaculate. Now, a lot of guys will like, whoa, pleasure, man. Like you're telling me like you're going to take away the greatest pleasure there is. No, that is false. In fact, you will have so much more pleasure by learning to engage in sexual activity and not ejaculate. First of all, so here's some things. Okay, so first of all, hold on. I can just keep going, right? So let me know that I've answered your question and I don't just keep going.
Well, so that was so good and very, very insightful, and exactly what I was hoping that you'd cover from based on the conversations that we've had. So I think about, as a leader of transformation, as being passionate about making a difference in the world, I think about how, and from a spiritual aspect as well, and you talked about how this is a purely physical thing, and yet I can correlate that to scripture in the Bible where, it talks about, like, for example, Solomon, who had 700 wives, and how did that didn't go well for him ultimately, and he talked about that. And you think about even the 10 Commandments where it talks about not committing adultery. And I remember talking to somebody about this and saying, look, you know what, it's not to limit us. It is really designed to say, hey, you know what, when you do these things or when you honor these things, life works. And when you don't, life doesn't work. And there's a whole deep well to each one of those things. And what you're talking about is like spreading your seed anywhere, there's a cost to that. And so even though the Bible doesn't necessarily go into, because I know a lot of our listeners are faith-based, mm-hmm. even though it doesn't go into the depth of sexual alchemy and so forth, and listening to you, realized how biblically sound it was in terms of like what God is saying. So there's so many levels to this that we could talk about like for days.
Oh yeah.
But when you think about performance in the boardroom, you think about family connections. I've had people on this show, a gentleman who him and his son were on this show, and they were talking about, and they wrote a book called Tender Lions. He had an addiction he talked about pornography. He also talked about the unfaithfulness to his wife and how he cleared that up. And his son was there, and they explained, and they went through the whole thing and how they work with men right now to help them to be men of honor and so forth. And so we talk about the family unit. I think about human trafficking, which is a huge problem. And yeah, we can rescue women and also, boys, girls, and so forth as well. So it's not just exclusive to women. But we can rescue them, and we can help heal the trauma and so forth, and create structures and, and things in place for that. But I keep thinking about the demand, and I think about what causes largely men, not exclusively, but largely men, to be perpetrators of that. What is happening in them? That's why I said earlier about compassion, is like, what's happening within men that is causing them to feel the need? They're looking for something. They're wanting to feel some need. What is the need that they're feeling? And you're speaking to this right now, is there's something that they're looking for. Now, obviously that's also evil. All right. So in terms of like the level of like child pornography and all that kind of stuff, that's straight up crazy, right? But there's something there, and you ask yourself and saying, like, how do we deal with demand and help heal? Because if we could help heal men and have less men have this lack or this need that they have to go, like you said, they need more, they need more, they need more, and they need it in different ways and distorted ways. And when we can reduce that, we can have a huge impact, I believe, on that. So so this is why this information is so powerful. And we've also seen at highest levels of business and government and entertainment industry, and you name it, even religious organizations, leaders, at the top level, that have fallen from grace, if you will. And there's, scandals all across the board. So there's a real issue here. And I do believe that it is a spiritual issue. And that's why I believe that you're one of the people that, one of the few people that I would have on this show talking about this, because of your background and experience and studies in all different kinds of religions, and understanding that spiritual grounding. So you're not just coming from a place of, hey guys, I'll show you how to have, more fun or whatever, or even be more powerful. But it's more, it's on a spiritual level, it's healing society. So there's that. And the second thing with that is, when you talked about, and I wanted you to maybe unpack that here briefly, is when we talk about masculinity, I can almost hear some women going, I don't know that we want more masculinity in society, because that's already created a problem, right? The patriarchal system and all of the driving capitalism at its worst kind of thing. So can you speak to, and just clarify, like when you talk about masculinity, that what it really is in its purest, healthiest form, that we would actually want more of, not just in the bedroom, but that we would actually want more of in society?
Yeah, so let's speak to masculinity, because it is there's this term toxic masculinity has become popular, and I would say that that's true. We don't want toxic masculinity, but what I would say is, anybody who might be toxic, portraying this toxic masculine, is actually not masculine at all. They're actually quite in their feminine energy. So let's define masculinity. And I will say, and I don't say this, but this is coming from different teachings from around the world, will say that it is someone who is sensitive first and sense controlled. Okay, so what does sense controlled mean? Let's start with that one. Sense control means that a man actually should be very controlled in himself. So a man should not be dictated by his emotions. This does not mean he doesn't have emotions. That doesn't mean he buries his emotions. It means he has a healthy relationship with his emotions. My wife will tell you, I'll sit there and a movie will come on and I'll be crying. I'll be like, oh, that's really sad, right? And so toxic masculinity may be like, don't cry at that movie. That's not a manly thing to do, even though my emotion says, no, that's a really sad scenario. Like, why wouldn't I cry? Why wouldn't I have feeling and emotion towards, what's happening? Why would I not have empathy to somebody else who may be going through something? It's only through that kind of empathy can we then step in someone else's shoes and be a provider and a protector. If I had no empathy, I wouldn't want to protect anybody, right? What I would just do whatever I want. So sense controlled means that a man can develop himself up to the point where he is above his emotions. He feels his emotions, but he doesn't act from his emotions. And he becomes a grounding force. So while there are a lot of chaotic times, and this is the leaders of transformation, one of the main jobs a leader does is they ground their people and say, hey, okay, got it. We get it. There's a challenge. There's a problem. Now get grounded. Let's get solid and let's give direction and move forward, right? You can only do that when you're sense controlled. So what is sense controlled in a very practical way? Well, I can decide when I eat and I don't eat compulsively. I decide when I'm going to watch some television and when to shut it off. I decide, okay, now it's time to go to bed. I decide, no, she's good. She looks good. And my biology says, wow, that she looks amazing, but I have a wife, so I'm not going to go there, right? That's sense controlled. It's not denying our urges and nature's. I don't deny anything in my life. If I see a woman that I'm attracted to, I'm going to be attracted to her. I can't help it. That's my biology. And to deny that, to say you should have no attraction, I think that's where that gets very unhealthy. And men, now we're not talking about transmutation. Now we're talking about suppression. Anything that becomes suppressed will eventually find an outlet of a darker nature. And that's where I think when we go to the human trafficking and we go to the child porn and we go to all these very dark places and where a lot of men don't want to be, but they find themselves there, you'll find that they'll have a lot of suppressive sexual energy. Their energy has simply been suppressed, denied, and now they're very toxic in their behaviors. And you'll find that they aren't sense controlled. Generally, there's probably drug use. There's probably a ton of pornography watching. There's a direct correlation between pornography watching and cases where men have done brutal things in their life, brutal acts, and you'll see that there's a link to porn addiction. So the link between how pornography messes with our minds and messes with our ability to be sense controlled. So if we've discussed that if nature's biggest success check mark is reproduction, then on a spiritual level, because if spirit, so this is talking about spirituality in not just a sentimental way, but a very scientific way of looking at spirituality, which is that there is spirit and there is matter, and matter is reflection of spirit. So consciousness is actually the truth. Reality is spirit, and illusion is matter. Matter only comes into form when spirit matter comes into form to reflect or to give manifestation to consciousness or spirit. So therefore, if sex is the highest pleasure on the physical level, then it exists on the spiritual level, but it's not physical. It's a non-physical thing. So love of God is the highest pleasure that the spirit experiences because it is its natural state. Why we are driven so badly for sex on a physical level is because consciously we forgot that we are actually souls that are all spiritual, and we totally identify with the body and all of its bodily conceptions. So again, we're going into the deep esoteric part of this, right? The first principle to understand in any spiritual tradition is the difference between spirit and matter. If we cannot distinguish these two things, there is no spiritual progress. There is only a show of spiritual progress, which is on a sentimental level. It's a level of ritual. I do all the rituals. I go to church. I sing the songs. I do all of this stuff. But do I feel and do I realize, not believe, realize? There's a difference between believing something and realizing something. You want to realize the scripture, and that means it's actually a scientific process of becoming more spirit than matter. So when a man retains his semen. Okay. What ends up happening is that the body, as I mentioned, reabsorbs that semen and redistributes it. As you retain for longer and longer periods of time, now you start going 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, years without ejaculation. First of all, imagine your sense control at that point. You could totally focus your mind into whatever you want. Your vibration will be so high. Why? What ends up happening is I want you to think of the analogy of water that gets turned up and heated and made into gas. So you have physical water that can be perceived by the physical senses. Then you turn that water up, it begins to transform or transmute or alchemize itself, this is sexual alchemy, into gas, invisible energy. But if that energy is harnessed, it can be used to fuel things, it can be used to move things forward. Okay, so everybody knows practically boiling water turns into gas. Here's what happens to the semen and sexual energy as it's retained in the body. You literally, as you begin to have an excess now of semen, because your body's now producing more. So right away, you are now, instead of living energetically in depletion, you're now living in abundance energetically. You have more than energy than even is required. Now, what happens when you have more than what you're required? You can begin to give it away because you've got more than enough. And if I am more than enough, if I am more than I need on a physical level, if I'm more energy than I am, or more spirit than I am physical matter, my physical matter circumstances will begin to reflect that because matter follows spirit. So sensitive. So what is a man? A man is someone who is first sense controlled, and then he becomes sensitive. Now, what does sensitive mean? He literally becomes sensitive to the energy. He can sense the energy around him and in him. So when he meets anyone, he doesn't just meet them on a physical level. He meets them on a spiritual level. He feels them. He can feel into them, and he can say, wow, okay, yes, you're a woman, and on a physical level, I find you attractive, but you're more than just a physical woman. You're also a soul like me, and I can feel your soul's blueprint. I can see where you're insecure. I can see where you're powerful, and I can create a context or a space around that just by intention that begins to flourish, right? That is sensitive. So sensitive isn't just a man crying through a movie, right? That's one part of being sensitive. That's the part of being so secure in yourself that you can allow your emotions to show, but you always witness your emotions. You don't just act from your emotions. Just because you're aroused doesn't mean you should go act upon that. That's sexual alchemy. I'm feeling aroused, but I have no natural outlet to that. My wife is not here. Great. I'm going to go take all that energy. Now it's time to do a video. Now it's time to write a blog. Now it's time, because what is sex energy? On a physical level, it's creative energy that makes a baby. So on a spiritual level, on a non-physical level, it's simply creative energy.
Yes.
Sex energy is simply the creative energy of the universe, right? So it's a beautiful thing. And that's why it's a sacred thing and should be used consciously. The challenge right now, when it comes to the human trafficking, when it comes to why do powerful men tend to get in trouble? Well, one, powerful men have sex drive. That's why they're powerful men. They are powerful because they have high sex drive, period. If you understand this science, you will understand why some people get into power and some people don't. The people who get into power have a high sexual drive. So the first thing a man wants to do is actually cultivate a high sexual energy so that he has the drive and force behind him to get things done. Then he wants to become sensitive. He doesn't just want to be, now I have high sex drive and I'm just going to act upon that on a physical way. Yes, the physical benefits are there. You will become more attractive to women. You will be able to There's all kinds of bedroom performance enhancements that come along with these practices. But that's just the surface of the practice. The deeper part of the practice is that you become sensitive. You literally become an energy alchemist. You can sense people's energy. Your own aura begins to expand. So like the water that turns into gas and begins to flow upwards, as you start to hold your semen for long periods of time, your body is now living in excess. You have more energy than is even required. Now you can serve others abundantly. You become a leader. Why? Because you will out-energize everybody. And not only will you out-energize them, you will literally transfer your energy to them. You will give life to your movement. You will give life to anything that you touch. It will begin to flourish because you are literally emanating creative energy. Okay? You are literally pulsating with universal creative energy. Now, as your semen becomes refined, so the body brings it through 7 layers of refinement, it turns it into what the yogis will call ojas. Ojas means aura or spiritual energy. Okay? So what the yogis will say is that as you return your seed, you will develop an aura, meaning your aura will begin to expand and become stronger. This is the scientific way of becoming more spiritual. See, it's not sentimental. It's not like I just say amen or namaste, or I just wave some sage around or something. I don't just do the ritual. You literally are becoming more spirit than matter because your aura is developing so much to the point where you develop what's called, either, depending on your language, right? A light body, a spiritual body, an astral body, a non-physical body in which you become everlasting. You literally become transcendent to the material nature. And because you become so in tune with the non-physical reality of the world, you also start identifying and entering into that non-physical reality where life is blissful and pure and just a fantastic ride. And so that is masculinity.
And
Women,
as a society needs that. And that's when we're talking about leaders, and there's a lot of talk right now about becoming more compassionate, more empathetic leaders,
yeah.
and servant leaders, and all of this. This is what got my, again, there's so many reasons why I wanted you to talk about this on this show, which is about transformation. This is like on a deep level, this is the transformation to happen, rather than up here and saying we need to learn new skills. But if there's a deficit down here, then that is going to be very difficult. That's behavior modification up here, where we've got to go deep into what is actually causing the transformation at a core, at a spiritual level, which will then lead, translate out into matter. So we could talk about this for hours. This is actually why I wanted you to do a webinar. Sure. So talk really quickly about the webinar that we're going to be doing, and that is available. So if someone has a group that they would like you to come in and do this for, have a private session, let's say maybe with an inner circle team or whoever that, yeah. Somebody who leads groups of men, but talk about what it is and what you're going to talk about and how they can register for that.
Yes, sure. I just wanted to add a little extra point just to make that clear, is that women can also do this because remember that within us, each of us, we have male and feminine energy within us. Yes. So women can learn to tap into just like a man can learn to tap into their masculine and feminine, women can do the same. So it's all available for women too. The only challenge with women, it's not a challenge per se. What makes women different than men is that by nature's design, a woman each month releases her sexual vitality through her period, right? Where men don't have to release their sexual vitality. And that's one of the main differences. I just wanted to make that point because I know there are women connected onto this show as well. I specifically work with men. I'm happy to talk to women and people of men and women on the subject. But I specifically created the program and training that I have for men. And so we're doing a sex mastery webinar. It's an hour and a half training where I'm going to show you the techniques of sexual alchemy. So at a high level, sexual alchemy consists of inner types of meditations to get you in tune with your own energies, learning to use the breath as a way to practice sense control and how to make your body go into states. So I'm going to show you, rather than reaching for caffeine, I'm going to show you a breathing exercise called the Tumo breath that's going to just light you up. So we're going to start the webinar where I'm just going to light you up and everyone's going to have total clarity and be like, whoa, geez, I'm like in a really good state. So I'm going to show you how to put yourself into different states. I'm going to show you how to use the breath as a way to do that, how meditation can help you go inwardly so that your consciousness, your awareness isn't just spread out and, I got this to do, I got this to do, I got this to do, but you can really cultivate your inner world. And muscle control, actually how to use your muscles to generate to generate a force where you begin to consciously create that aura, where you actually learn to steam your semen in a way, right? And actually create an energetic flow upwards. And if you're familiar with acupuncture, then these practices will be that will be a great analogy, because much of what I take from is from the Chinese medicine system, which the Taoist tradition used, and, is used by many different traditions and cultures all around the world. But just to give you like an analogy of, say, well, where does this come from? We're going to use the nadis. So the yogis called it the nadis, that we have 72,000 nadis or pressure points or energetic intersections within the body. And it's the same as acupuncture. They use the same nadis to be able to release blocks in the body, energetic blocks. So I'm going to show you how to release energetic blocks within your system to ignite your sexual energy. I'm going to go deeper into the science of semen retention, how to specifically use your sexual energy to consciously create and manifest. And specifically for the leaders of transformation, I'm going to be giving a specific section where we're going to go deep into leadership and sexual energy and how the two are related, so that you yourself can become empowered as a leader and you can help those around you. Because what's the job of a leader? To create other leaders. So by you understanding this, then you'll be able to also help others and see in their own energy where they might be blocked, and how you can help them succeed in, the movements and the projects in which you're creating. And of course, I'm going to give time for Q&A and questions. It's a lot of fun, and it's going to be a great training. So when you register, be ready to train. It's not going to be passive where you're going to sit there and just listen to me. We're going to actually do exercises right there on the webinar, so you can experience sexual alchemy rather than just talk about it. But there'll be a lot of great information to also give you the knowledge bank so that you can understand it at a deeper level. Brilliant. Should I give the dates and times and all that?
Yeah, why don't we do that? And if anyone's listening to this later on, of course, they can go to your website and find out more about it, the information in your YouTube channel and so forth. We'll make sure that that's available. But yes, please.
That's right. So assuming you're listening beforehand, we're doing this on April 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a 90-minute training. We're going to leave a link so that you can register and get access to the webinar. If you are hearing about this afterwards, then we will have a link for you where you can watch the recording, and that way you'll still be able to take advantage of the training and all the good stuff that you're going to learn on the webinar.
Beautiful, beautiful. And for those of you that some people will go to the show notes and they'll find the link. I'm also going to give it here just so it's easy, so you can go and find that out. It is live, and it is nakuladas.com/LOT. Nakuladas, which is NAKULADAS, is how you spell that. And Nick, Thank you. I get so excited about this because, when we talk about transformation, I'm really passionate about helping people to transform the way they see themselves, the way they see others, and the way they see the world around them. And really at a core level, it's a spiritual transformation that occurs and everything else flows out of that. And so that's why I get so excited to hear something like this, which is not talked about, that has such a pervasive impact in society, in our own lives, but then also in how we impact others. It's just brilliant. So thank you for giving us a little bit of a taste of it. And I hope our listeners are going to take advantage of that webinar, because I know it's going to be super awesome and I'm excited about it as well. So thank you again for being here. And thank you to our listeners for being here. You might have thought when you started this thinking, what is she doing? Talking about, like, this is totally off topic, but it's not. And it is right on topic with the Leaders of Transformation on so many levels. And so I hope you've enjoyed it. If this has resonated with you, please, of course, leave us a rating and review, but even more importantly, share it with someone. If you know there's someone out there that is addicted to porn, that has some unhealthy habits in this way, or is feeling just really depleted and doesn't know why, and has tried all the techniques and just hasn't been able to move forward, then send this to them and have them listen to it. And perhaps it will, I know that it has the seeds, no pun intended, to be able to help them in whatever it is that they're dealing with, and to shift their experience of life on a spiritual level. So and then you build on it from there, depending on your faith and so forth. You build on it from there. So these are core level things that we're talking about here. So again, thank you for being here. I encourage you to share it. We'd love to hear your comments and questions. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.